Step families and remarriages on average last shorter period of time than first marriages. And there's about a 10% higher re-divorce rate in remarriages than there is in first marriages. Has to do with several issues. Number one is stress is very high in step families, particularly during the first year. And the good news about that is that the stress really drops out and drops down after about the first year after remarriage. And it's similar to first marriage families with similar age kids. The issues that people struggle with early on are very critical ones, and people need to pay attention to them. So one of the issues that people need to talk about is money. So many people pool all their money together in one pot, and other people put it together in multiple pots. And it really doesn't matter which way you do it as long as you agree. So that's the key thing. What we found in our research is that over time, people tend to pool their resources all together more and more, I guess as they develop additional trust in the relationship and feel comfortable that it's going to last. The other big issue that people need to deal with, and it's the most important, is dealing with parenting issues. So what we found in our research was that early on, the step-parent needs to focus first on forming a relationship with the children rather than being a parental disciplinarian. Because if they do, and even if they do it in a good way, the children rebuff the person, and it creates friction in the marriage and friction in the family. So people need to understand that the step-parent initially needs to focus on forming a relationship. One of the things that the step-parent can do is to help the biological parent monitor the children's behavior. So knowing what they're doing, whether they're going to school, whether they're doing their homework, who they're hanging out with, is a very helpful thing for the biological parent. And it communicates interest and concern about the children. And the kids seem to like that. And that's different than control. So you're not trying to tell them what to do, but you're just keeping up with what, in fact, they're up to. After a couple of years in a step family, the step parent actually can play a very important parental role. And if they provide high quality parenting, the children do much better. So having two parents after that 2 or 2.5 years later, the kids really benefit from that. And it's just that people have to wait that period of time to form the relationship. The next issue that people need to focus on is making sure that they form a strong marital bond. And many times in marriages, when you have children present, the marriage goes to the back burner, as we say. It becomes secondary. And people don't do things to meet their adult needs. I'm not talking about just sex. I'm talking about communication and intimacy and being close and sharing times together. And that's really ultimately why most people remarry, is they want to have an adult partner to share their lives with. Unfortunately, many people in step families don't nurture their marriages. And if you don't form a strong marital bond, you can't work out the stress and you can't work out the parenting issues that are on. So people really need to take time to make sure that they spend some alone time together, have date nights, talk to each other every day about what's going on in their lives. And that's very important for them to do. The third issue that people need to focus on is making it easy for the children to have a relationship with their non-residential parent. So most of the time, children come into a step family because there's been a prior divorce, and most of the time, children continue to see that parent and visit with that parent. And if in the step family they make it difficult to do that, that's very hard on the children. Having a lot of conflict when the children transition from one household to another is very hard on them. Denigrating or criticizing the other parent in front of the children is hard on them. And the way the children experience that criticism is that they are being criticized themselves because they're half that parent. And so when a mom, for example, says something negative about the boy's father, he hears that as a criticism of himself. And oftentimes that's why he becomes defensive. So I don't think parents intend to do that, hurt their children in that way. But if they do, they are harming their children, and that's not good for them. The other thing that people need to realize is that when kids come and go between households, it's an emotional event for kids oftentimes. So they're really happy to see that other parent usually, but they're also sad to leave their home. When they leave the other parent, they have to readjust to the other household. So what we found is that it's important to allow that child a little bit of an adjustment time and understand that they may not behave the normal way that they would normally behave. and that you should give them some space. So if a child goes off to see their father for the weekend and then they come back, it's not a good idea to have a family event planned where it involves that kid being part of that event, because they need a little adjustment time. And there's big variability in the way kids adjust to that. Another key thing is kids do not like being grilled about what happened at the other parent's home. So parents need to let the child talk about what they want to talk about, but not grill them and make them talk about what's going on in the other household. Because again, they often hear that as criticism and things like that. Long term, the other thing that step families need to do is they need to form an identity and a sense of who they are. And oftentimes that's around sharing holiday times, sharing family rituals and things like that. And it's important in step families that that family develop their own and not just do it the way they used to do it previously. So it's important that each family member, each parent need to bring some information in around those things. In forming that parenting coalition together, it's important that people be very explicit about what the rules are and what the consequences are for the children. So we encourage parents to sit down and write down some basic rules for the household and what are the consequences if those rules are violated. So for example, one of the important rules is that people treat each other with courtesy. You can't demand respect of the other parent or step-parent, but you can require courtesy. Sometimes it's important that kids do certain chores around the house, help with the dishes, things like that. So those things need to be written down. Those rules need to be age appropriate for the children. And then if the child doesn't abide by that rule, what's the consequence? So the child knows. That way, if there is an issue around discipline and the step-parent happens to be there, they can point out, you didn't do this rule and this is your consequence for doing it. In that case, the biological parent will support the step-parent in that way. The children can't undermine that relationship because it's all explicit. So particularly in the beginning, it's a good idea to write those rules down and put them somewhere where everybody can see them, like on your refrigerator or bulletin board or something like that. In our research, we actually found that there were 3 different distinct groups of step families. First of all, our research was mainly focused on stepfather families. That's where a mother had children and the stepfather moved in. He may or may not have children, but he moved in and his kids typically visited. That's the most common kind of step family. We found 3 different kinds. The first one we called neo-traditional. And these families look a lot like first marriage families. People remarry because they want to have not only a new marriage, but they want to have a family life. They liked being in a family, they liked having children, and they chose to do that. These families also could adjust to change quite well. It wasn't that they had fewer stresses or challenges, it's just that they could roll with them more easily. They didn't get all upset, they didn't get into arguments about it, they just were able to adjust to those kinds of changes. They really focused on forming a strong marital bond, so they did things like having date nights, and they made sure that they talked and developed a strong marital relationship. And they also developed a good parenting plan. Early on, some of the stepfathers tried to jump in too soon, and they were rebuffed by their kids, but over time, they became active parents with the kids. And these were the most well-adjusted children in these kind of step families. The second type of step family we found, we called matriarchal. And in matriarchal step families, it looks like a single parent family almost. You have a strong mother, she's competent, she can go out and earn a living, take care of her kids, and the reason why she remarries is because she wants a male partner, an adult partner to share her life with. She doesn't necessarily need his help with parenting, and these families looked kind of like a single parent family, and the stepfather was kind of like this person who wasn't that engaged with the kids. He would engage with his wife, but he pretty much was disengaged from the children. And this actually worked quite well, and we were surprised. The one place or the 2 places where there was conflict around this is over time, if he decided he wanted to get involved and parent the kids, then oftentimes there was conflict because the mom didn't want his help. She wanted him to be her husband. Or if she wanted some help from him, these guys often weren't available. So she might be running late from work one day, and ask him to pick up the kids, and he forgets, or he just doesn't do things that she asked related to the kids. And other than that, these families work quite well. The kids were quite well adjusted. The third kind of family we call romantic families, and we call them romantic because they had an idealized version about what a stepfamily should be like, and it was really more like a nuclear family, first marriage family, than a stepfamily. These people also remarried because they wanted a family and a marriage, but they had incredible amounts of unrealistic expectations. They thought they could be an instant family, everybody love each other, get along, and that's just not what happens. It takes time to develop that. And because they thought of themselves as a nuclear family, first marriage family, they often had trouble dealing with things like ex-spouses when the kids would go visit. If the child would come back from a visit and they weren't behaving properly, they wouldn't understand that had to do with the ex-spouse. And they often would have conflict with the kids. They'd have conflict in the marriage around this. And these were the most divorce-prone of the families that we studied. Over time, they either got divorced or they evolved into one of the other kind of patterns. So I think it's important when you think about how you're going to set your family up that you consider those different options. Some of the important things to consider when you come together as a step family is, number one, understand that it's going to take some time to come together. It's not going to happen instantly. Stress is high during that first year. The good news is it drops off after the first year. I really encourage people to read about what it's like to be in a step family so that they understand the challenges that they're going to face so that they can make a better choice about that. There are support groups out there for step families. Those are often quite helpful for people. Community centers, churches, synagogues, places like that often offer these, and they're quite helpful. And the other thing is if you find that you're having too much difficulty, reach out and get some professional help. Talk to a psychologist who knows something about step families and who can help you with that sooner than later. It's important to talk to a psychologist who knows about step families because otherwise they may not be as helpful. So that's what I would recommend is, seek out, get information, educate yourself about it, and don't be afraid to step out there and get some professional help.